Hello, I'm James Morrow, and in the words of Karl Marx, workers of the world, unite! No. Not like that. This week on Busting the Narrative, the Canadian truckers' freedom convoy and the mainstream media's attempt to portray these liberty-loving Canucks as kooks, anti-vaxxers, and even Nazis. Buckle up, it's gonna be quite a ride. Okay, let's kick off this week with a little quiz. Can you tell me which of these is a peaceful protest? Is it this? Or is it this? Did you get that? No? Okay, let's try again. How about this? But if that's not peaceful enough for you, how about this? Well, of course, if you spend any time watching the mainstream media, you already know the answer to this question. Those videos of Canadian truckers protesting not just vaccine mandates, but a host of harsh coronavirus restrictions still in place in many Canadian provinces, restrictions that make Australia look like the land of the free, are the bad guys. And the rioters who tore America apart in 2020? Well, they're just mostly peaceful protests, don't you know? Never mind the burning downtown in the background, this is just all about social justice. These rules, some would say double standards, are of course cheered on by the Canadian and indeed the world media, which looks at places like Florida in the United States as COVID-loving hellholes of free dumb. The narrative is quite clear. While 2020's violent riots were about equity and social justice, the ongoing Canadian truckers' freedom convoy protests, which are being posted on social media under the amusing hashtag honk honk, are the work of neo-Nazis and anti-vax kooks. This Washington Post op-ed captured the mood perfectly, saying that to fight the authoritarianism of these protests, we must not humanize the protesters. Said the author, quote, Canada's response to the convoy should be a strict line of resistance that doubles down on, or in certain cases at least introduces commitments to anti-hate resistance, pandemic supports vaccine mandates, and a media policy of refusing to platform, humanize, or, God forbid, glorify the convoy and its members beyond the bare necessity of speaking to their existence and outlining a program for pushing back, unquote. Yes, that's right, friends. To prevent fascism, we must completely unperson an entire class of people who disagrees with us. George Orwell couldn't make this stuff up. This, of course, ignores the demands of the protesters, which include much more than just being about an end to vaccine passports, not vaccines, by the way, as well as a lifting of COVID restrictions, waiving of fines for COVID rule violations, and reinstatement of people who have lost their jobs. Not entirely unreasonable, don't you think? And by the way, just to be clear, again, here at Busting the Narrative, we're not against vaccines. I mean, I'm jabbed and boosted myself, a fact which I credit with making my own recent COVID case no more than troublesome than a half a day's headache. But one can still say the vaccines are a useful tool that help to cut deaths and hospitalizations while also believing that whether or not to get one or to get boosted should be a matter of free choice. After all, this week, the prestigious medical journal, The Lancet, reported that a study had found, quote, the impact of vaccination on community transmission of circulating variants of COVID-19 appeared to be not significantly different from the impact among unvaccinated people. Did you get that? They also said the current evidence suggests that the current mandatory vaccination policies might need to be reconsidered, unquote. Well, that's why in the UK, the National Health Service, remember the brave doctors and nurses, everyone went out onto their balcony and banged their pots and pans for at the start of the pandemic? Well, they have scrapped their mandatory vaccine policies, but not so much for the truckers. No, this is about so much more than vaccines, not just for the protesters, but the media, which has since the start of the pandemic worked hand in glove to promote the most alarmist narratives and push for the most draconian restrictions. This has been made clear time and time again with revelations that Chief U.S. Medico Dr. Anthony Fauci conspired with the media to destroy the Great Barrington Declaration, a plan backed by eminent scientists like Jay Bhattacharya of Stanford and Martin Kulldorff of Harvard, calling for the protection of the vulnerable while allowing the general public to continue living as normally as possible, something that was already called for in all the pandemic plans that the world had before COVID-19. And now we see the same thing happening again with these freedom protests, and indeed anyone who puts their head above the parapet and says, enough, let's get back to normal. Because the fact is that the Canadian protests, which again will attract some kooks and nutters just like every protest does, especially those which come from the left, are about what sort of society do we want to be? Is it one where people who spend their days sending emails enforce their own neurotic views about safety on people with far riskier jobs, who want to make up their own mind about how they choose to manage danger even in a pandemic? Or is it a world where individual humans have autonomy over their own lives and their own bodies? Something that, by the way, up until 5 minutes ago, was an absolute article of faith in the high church of the left. To put it another way, will we be a society where our democracy and freedoms are subject to the whims of public health authorities who could, tomorrow, turn around and say, well, the environment is also a medical issue, so what about lockdowns on flights and cars? Or will it be a world where individuals have dignity as individuals and are treated not just as vectors of disease who need to be ruthlessly controlled, managed, and silenced, lest they get us all killed with bad behavior and, even worse, unapproved ideas? I know which side I'm on. What about you? I'm James Morrow, and if you like these videos, make sure to like, share, and subscribe below. Hong Kong.